Welcome to Towers, a Metazoo podcast. I'm back. Remember how I said the last episode was the last episode of the season? Apparently I lied. Unintentionally. I thought that was going to be it. But then Dark Tower happened, and I was like, okay, I had a couple experiences here that would make good episodes. And also, probably the biggest news of the year. And let's jump straight into that. Caster Cup has been delayed. The big event that they've been selling us for the last year, Caster Cup at New York Comic-Con, has been the big thing for a while, and players have tried to divine using a mix of stars and cryptic messages and Metazoo hours to figure out, like, is it going to be in the con? Is it going to be outside of the con? Do I need tickets? Do I not need tickets? A few months ago, they were pretty explicit on like, yeah, we're going to do Comic-Con and you should have tickets. They specifically referenced fickle players who tend to buy things last minute. This announcement was a huge win for fickle players, not so much for people who listened and were prepared. If you bought hotels or, heaven forbid, Comic-Con tickets early, I am so sorry. I will tell you I'm sorry, because if you try to get any kind of response out of the company, they're just going to roast you. As is usual, customer relations has never been a strong suit of Metazoo's. I wish it wasn't that way, but as players, we got to have each other's back. So I will say I'm sorry. Look, I read the reasonings, and the reasonings are sound in that, like, it was going to be so expensive. Comic-Con 4-day tickets were looking to be about $600 secondhand. And the last rumblings was it was going to be a 4-day event. 4 rounds on Thursday, 4 rounds on Friday, top 32 Saturday, and the finals on Sunday. So you would have had to purchase those, and then you factor in hotels and flights. It was going to be a very expensive tournament. That being said, it was going to be the tournament, and, you know, I wish the PR was a little bit different. Scratch that, I wish the PR was a lot different, but it's to be expected from Metazoo at this point. Had they stuck with having it at Comic-Con and received player complaints about how expensive it was going to be, in a different universe, they would have just said, hey, for a $1.5 million prize pot, an initial investment makes sense, and they want the most dedicated players to play at Caster Cup. Instead, we're in this universe where they say, hey, we want the most players to participate as possible. We want the online client online, etc., etc. This is just how it's going to go. I've mentioned this before. I don't know if it's like a CEO playbook or it's like, hey, if you're running a business, never admit mistakes. Don't apologize to customers because it makes you look bad. Look, no matter what Metazoo decides, you're the child, they're the adult, they're going to have some reasoning. Recently, they pitched doing the first few rounds on the online client, and I mentioned, hey, this might be a barrier for people who don't have like functioning laptops or a good internet connection, which is a lot of the player base, and I was told off for that. And so if this is the kind of thing that irritates you, go talk to other players. Like, you're not going to feel better talking to Metazoo. They're not going to care. So what does this mean? Well, it changes everything. It was recently announced that Legacy was being pushed back to December, which means we had our card pool going into Caster Cup. You could build your spell books with confidence that they were going to be relevant going into the event. Now, we don't know when the tournament's going to happen. They decided to switch focus from Caster Cup to this new Hello Kitty set that they're doing like a whole giant booth for at Comic-Con. And we don't know what those cards are going to be like. There hasn't been any spoilers or anything. And I know when there's licensed product, there are different rules on kind of how you can advertise and talk about them. Now, I'm hoping the Hello Kitty collabs are focused on more like simple and direct mechanics, just because it does bring a lot of people into the game, and giving them an initial bench in which to figure out the rules and the complexities, I think, would be really great before you go in. But it's possible this is going to be a very powerful set. I know we had like Bats Maru from the San Diego promos. It's a very powerful card. So we could be facing completely different spell books come next month, or they could be, you know, more just for fun. But beyond that, with Legacy coming out in December and having some war cards involved, and even War itself coming up sometime in the next likely 6 or 7 months, if we look at normal spring releases, we just don't know. Personally, because my experience has mostly been with towers and not so much with constructed, I'm still working on spell books and trying to get as much practice in as possible. But I'm also knowing like, okay, anything I do now could change. Now, I did ask in response, like, hey, is Caster Cup still happening this year, or are we looking at more of a 2024? And your usual loyalists like Argos piped in and said like, hey, the announcement said it's happening this year, so it's going to happen this year. Personally, I don't think Caster Cup is going to happen this year. Here's my prediction. It's almost October. I'm going to bring out my crystal ball card from Long Beach last year, and I'm going to do a prediction. So this October event at Comic-Con is going to be very involved for everybody who works for the company. This booth is reported to be huge. They're trying to do more with the online client there. They're going to have to get home and prep Caster Cup. And I think that's going to take more than a month. So you're looking at November. And if it takes more than a month, now you're getting into Thanksgiving and kind of the start of the more travel and work-oriented holiday season in the United States. And so I cannot see it happening in November. And then with December, we get more erratic weather, especially the last few years. We've seen flights get shut down en masse as we've had these mega blizzards and all of these wild events. Even if they were to do it in Texas, Texas often gets hit by extreme weather events. And then you have, Christmas, you have overtime work at many of the places that a Metazoo player is going to work. So I can't see it happening in December. I don't think it's going to happen in January. We've never really had a lot of activity in January. That's usually a good month for like keeping your head down. So here's my prediction. Maybe mid to late November, probably December. We're going to get an announcement about how they want Caster Cup to be as good as possible, and that because of the tower's restriction for qualifying, they want as many players to qualify as possible. And so they want to have the next tower or their moving tower with the online client. And in order to use the online client, you're going to need these code cards from Legacy. So they're going to want it to happen after Legacy. And this is going to go one of two ways. If they feel like their online client is good enough to host a tower, then we're going to see Caster Cup after the moving tower. And for those who don't know, the moving tower, they've had an icon for it from Earth Tower when they got all of the different tower icons. They were on the tablecloths and they have a big banner with them. It looks really cool. It's kind of like a Howl's Moving Castle style tower. And that's going to be online. And in theory, it's going to be aura neutral, just because getting all of the cards is probably going to be rather difficult. And it's not known if there's going to be any like trade component to the game or if you're just going to have to work with the booster packs you get. I did preview the online client and talk to Bats quite a bit about it at Dark Tower, and it's neat, but it's very much an alpha. So we just don't know what this is going to look with, hundreds of people playing on it. And also, like, mechanics are different. There are more likely going to be cards that are not going to be in the system because of things like licenses. But if they can get it online to that point, and if their goal is to make it as open and accessible as possible, a post-legacy release makes sense. A tower anyone can play from their home makes sense. And if you put all those together, like, I don't know if Caster Cup's happening in the next 6 months, because then you get to the point where War should be on the horizon. Like, they are playtesting for it right now. And why not wait to release War? They can have a repeat of Earth Tower where they release War, and then for that big release, the conclusion of the block, they also do Caster Cup, encouraging players to scramble to get as many booster boxes as possible and as many hours in to incorporate the new cards, because those cards are going to be powerful. I doubt the meta pre-war is going to resemble the meta post-war. I could be wrong. We could have Caster Cup in December. I'm definitely preparing as if that's going to happen, but shout out to your fickle players. So sorry to you that have spent, money on tickets that you have to pick up in person, that have paid time off that you can't get back, who invested in this tournament, who kept track of news and tried to follow it. Like, ultimately, Metazoo, I think, is best suited for people, honestly, like me, who have very flexible schedules, who are able to work from wherever, and who can afford to pay an extra couple $100 in order to do something last minute and therefore to be guaranteed. I bought my plane ticket the day before this announcement and was able to get it refunded. And I had not bought Comic-Con tickets yet. I told people, like, I'm going to wait until next week to see if there's an announcement because, oh boy, these things are expensive. And so, like, I got lucky. Most people I know did not get lucky, and I feel for you. So what else is on the bulletin board? Flame Tower. It looks like prizing has started to go out for Flame Tower. There was a united effort by the players to try to get that money out, honestly, before Dark Tower to pay for Dark Tower, but if not, definitely before Caster Cup. So now that's going out. If you top 32'd at Flame Tower, check your emails, check your PayPal account. I was in top 8 and I got paid, and I know people in top 32 got paid before me, and so more than likely for like semifinalists, finalists, it's gonna come soon. And then Dark Tower. I finally made it to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and it was awesome. I flew into Ohio a couple days before just to stay with a friend and then be set up so I could pick up my team the next day and drive to West Virginia. I'd never been to West Virginia before. And we arrived Friday evening and were able to kind of see people set up the festival. Something that was very clear with this event is you could tell who got into the game because they like cards and who got into the game because they like cryptids. I'm definitely someone who's brought in by the cryptids, so I was nerding out. It was like Disneyland for me. Just running around, getting the lore, taking pictures with the statue, talking to locals and a lot of people just from cryptid areas in the East who had traveled to be there. Going into 2024, this kind of worked out with towers this year, but I would love it if we continue to, like every other event, like half of the events, do them in cryptid relevant locations, like I'll travel to them, and then half of them do them in metropolitan areas like, you know, New York City was where we did Earth Tower, we did Flame in Texas, so that way other people can get to those. Because probably my favorite thing about this game, on top of the community and like the game itself playing at a high level, is just digging deeper into the folklore of the North American continent and the many cultures that call it home. I've been following Mothman stuff since high school, and so being able to go and like actually walk into the woods and see where these things happen was sweet. I got food poisoning going into day 1, which was absolutely awful. The games were really interesting. My opponents were phenomenal. And boy, did I learn a lot playing whilst that sick. By round 7, I had picked up my 3rd loss, which was enough to disqualify me for day 2. Honestly, it's a miracle I stayed standing. My first 4 rounds, I felt like I was about to pass out, but the games went strong. And then the back third of them, I was dealing with a lot more. When it came to variance, I was just so shot. I wasn't able to play the social part of the game. I know one game, I was one potential turn from winning. I was just drawing aura, but I had an All Hallows even hand, and I was about to hit my 7th drop. And I looked down and counted my aura, which is a mistake I normally wouldn't do. And my opponent read that correctly, and New Year's New Beginning me. And that was the game. And congratulations to them. Like, that's exactly what they should do. But it really highlighted kind of the importance of tells and those other elements and like when you can and cannot do them. And I just did not have the energy for them. But the rest of my team made it to day 2. Congratulations to Logan, Herman, and Ricky. And then congratulations to the collective loosely known as Owl, who just keeps topping these tournaments. I also want to shout out Quetz Coalition. They brought in a red ink centric Dark Spirit spellbook, which is probably my favorite spellbook I've seen at a tower. It only worked because of red ink, and that was a really smart move of them to build around that because they could just disrupt that Wendigo interaction. I had never seen a red ink before, so me being like a novelty-based player who just wants to experience as many things as possible, when I got red inked, I believe round 4, that was wild. Like, I've never seen a $5,000 card in person, let alone in a deck, let alone have it used against me. I fought as hard as I could, citing in hard infinite powers, which let me disrupt and take game 2, but the odds were stacked against me. That spellbook was excellent. Both Easton and Taylor faced Ricky and Herman. Taylor took the game against Herman. Ricky took the game against Easton and moved ahead. Guy, who I shout out on the show all the time, also had the spell book and got 35th. Maybe at some point, I still aspire to do interviews as part of this show, so maybe at some point I'll grab one of them and talk to them about that spell book. So yeah, I loved Dark Tower. I wish I wasn't sick at day one, but honestly, it worked out financially because day two, I was able to secure promos and several of my teammates were able to show up and secure Point Pleasant promos. We got pretty lucky between our bundles and the cards we got at the Metazoo booth in getting that Mothman promo, which I was able to bring home to our hardworking teammates who were not able to go. So financially, those cards are going for like 150 to 200 a piece. I think it ended up working out, and I was able to go see the Mothman Museum and participate in a lot of the booths during day two when I wasn't watching rounds. So hats off to Metazoo for that one. Dark Tower ruled. I look forward to whatever you do for Mothman Fest next year. And as a final note, let's talk about this podcast. So like I said, last episode was supposed to be the last one with a potential Q&A episode, but I have two more that I would like to do. One, I would like to do an episode on playing while sick. I did learn a lot in that process, and I had a lot of sympathetic casters who regaled me with their own stories of being sick at Yu-Gi-Oh! Tournaments and other events in their past. And so it's definitely a skill that is good to have a handle on. And then there's also just some things I could have packed and done in advance to avoid that situation. And then I think it would be good to do an episode on variants. Now that I have two towers with a team where most of the team makes it to top 32 and does really well, but some of the teammates get clobbered, it's been a really good lesson in variants and figuring out, like, is it your spell book or is it your draws? And then I did get enough questions for Q&A episode, though I definitely have plenty room for more if you have any. And so we'll be doing that. Now that there's no Caster Cup in the next month, I've got time to do that, but then we'll go quiet until we get Towers news, or maybe even Caster Cup news, in which Season 2 will kick off. Look forward to those. To everyone who said hi, it was so good meeting you, or seeing you again, or putting a face to the Instagram/Discord account. Please message me on Instagram with any topic ideas you have, and I will cover them. Until next time. Towers, a Metazoo podcast, was created by me, Ester Ellis. The cover art was made by Chandler Candela. Music by the Heatley Bros. More details in the description. Want to say hello? Follow the show on Instagram at Towers Podcast. Send me an email at towersgamepodcast@gmail.com and say hi in Metazoo's Discord servers. Many of the figures in Metazoo originate in indigenous lore, and I think it's important for me to acknowledge that I make this podcast on the traditional lands and home of the Tongva Nation. This game presents us with a rich opportunity to get in touch with the living cultures that surround us, and I hope you can take a moment to reflect on the history of the land you stand on, and the figures in the cards you play.